There were raids on bars for no reason. They would make up a reason, of course. There's a fire ordinance, or it's overcrowded, or there's drugs involved. But, you know, they really just were doing it to be, you know, harassing. At that time, there was no one I could go to. Dean Trantalis wasn't, you know, a city official, just the various people. So you had to rely on yourself. And when the Copa was raided in the 80s, and it was a massive raid, the sheriff had Channel 7 helicopters, and he was in a limousine in a tuxedo and his wife in a long dress because they had been to some function, and he had some Russian diplomat or somebody from the police department in Moscow with him and his wife. And they just stormed into the club, and it was a real sort of like rehearsed or planned event. So when the police come to raid, they usually come in and they've got flashlights and they make the manager do whatever, turn off the music, you know, turn on the lights. But this was like huge camera lights coming in, following the sheriff, you know, Mr. Big Stuff. And there was a helicopter from Channel 7 with a big spotlight on the club going around and around and around. So even as people came out, they were shooting film as people were coming out the door. That was probably the thing that worried the patrons the most, was the fact that this was all on film and it was going to be on the 10 o'clock news. I mean, what, you know, is my face going to be shown? And they began lining people up against the wall, frisking people, asking them their name, their address, their phone number, all that kind of information. And one by one, they were marched out of the club. And this took a long, long time because the club was really crowded. One of the things that was really interesting about what happened that night was the way that the customers were treated. They were treated like they were, you know, criminals. They were treated like they were going to be detained in a death camp or something. It was like terrible. And they arrested some of the entertainers that I had there for lewd and lascivious, you know, behavior, which wasn't really true at all. But they had filmed the wet jockey shorts contest and thought that was lewd and lascivious. The manager and the assistant manager were arrested because they were operating a club that they felt was a drug den. They really exaggerated everything to such an extent that it was, you know, sort of like ridiculous. But we bailed everyone out of jail, got everyone out of jail, got them representation, had most of their lawsuits dropped. Norm Kent did that. And just we fought it from a position of that they were, you know, illegally entering the premises on false charges, all kinds of different things. You know, there were innocent people that were being charged with what? Nothing. And yet they were harassed to this extent. What happened with some of those people that were like teachers and policemen, you know, firemen, they were concerned about their job. One person who was an entertainer, Tiny Tina, was fired from her nursing job because of it. We got her job back for her months later, but she was fired because of that incident, which had nothing to do with how well she performed her duties as a nurse. It was very upsetting at the time. But that was my stand-up point. That's when I said, you know, okay, I'm going to draw a line in the sand. I don't care about anyone else. I had the money to be able to fight it, and I didn't care what it cost. They were going to pay for that. Just in a moral victory was enough, because there were people that were so injured by that raid and were innocent to it all. And as the club owner, you feel responsible that, you know, it went to court and motions going back and forth and different things. But Norm was very good at what he did, because he kind of got them in a corner where he was papering them with enough of the lawsuit and the publication that was, you know, in the papers constantly. And most of the stuff that was in the paper was kind of negative toward the sheriff. And that was what we were trying to paint in court, was the innocence of the people there and how they were treated. And they have it on film, so it was easy to articulate and then show. The whole thing was orchestrated as a publicity stunt, and that was one of the things that we were able to use in our favor on court, that perhaps this was all staged just for him, for publicity, for his re-election. So I figured this is time to take a stand. So I hired Norm Kent to sue them, and to make them, a part of the decision was to make them have diversity training, so there'd be some sensitivity on the part of the police department in Fort Lauderdale and Broward County, which we did. We won the lawsuit. We made them donate money to AIDS organizations here in Fort Lauderdale, which they did. And there is diversity training in Fort Lauderdale and Broward County Sheriff's Department, and I think it started because of that lawsuit. What happened as a result of that raid on the Copa, Sheriff Navarro was defeated by Ron Cochran, who changed the police department dramatically. He changed the police department because he really insisted on thorough diversity training, and it goes on till to this day. But we feel that Sheriff Navarro was, defeated in that election because of this raid and the notoriety that it got. It was in the papers for weeks and weeks. That hurt the business too. I mean, people were afraid. Is it going to be another raid tonight? Do I go out? Is it dangerous? So I mean, they impacted my business as a club owner.